Welcome to the Hockey Writers Podcast 2022-23 NHL season preview. Today, I, your host Kyle Knopp, and my co-host Matthew Zator are joined by Islanders writer Mike Fink. Mike, how are you doing today?
I'm doing good. Thank you for having me for this season preview.
We're very excited to have you on, and obviously we're going to be talking Islanders on this show, so let's jump right into it. And we're going to start with the forwards. So big names that were left on the board this season: Johnny Gaudreau, Matthew Tkachuk, Nazem Kadri. What are your thoughts on the lack of changes to this forward group from this past season?
This is kind of interesting because I think you could look at this in two ways, depending on. So I'll get to my answer in a bit, but you kind of could take the forward. You could take the missing out on stars in two ways. You could either say, and it really depends on how you look at last season. You could say that last season was like a outlier, a fluke where injuries piled up. They started on the road for 13 games in a row. So it was kind of the season you kind of burn the tape. Okay, they're going to make it back and that forward unit's going to be fine. Or the more cynical approach is you look at that offense, which scored 2.79 goals per game. They, again, struggled outside of the Brock Nelson, Anders Lee led line, and Matthew Barzal took a step back. And you look at last year, and particularly with how Barzal did not have a forward to complement his game, and say we can run this back, and that's where the concern is, and fans are starting to get frustrated with that. I think because this is not. With Lamoriello, particularly, this is not a fluke. This is not a coincidence. He missed out on Panarin in 2018, that free agency, or 2019 free agency. Panarin went to the Rangers. There was rumors about whether he was interested in on him or not, and that's kind of like, okay, you missed once, and this year he missed on three, where didn't get Palat, didn't get Gaudreau. Gaudreau was the one that everyone was thinking is possible, and then Kadri was the one everyone was like, oh, for sure he's going to get Kadri, especially the way it dragged out. And at this point, it's a reoccurring theme where he's not going to overpay for a forward. So I can understand the frustration with that, especially with how last season turned out. And that's kind of how I would start with that.
Well, I mean, you talked about big names. This is a guy who's been floating around quite a bit everywhere. And of course, I know it better than most because I cover the team he's on. So JT Miller, apparently there was a trade kind of talked about at the draft that was nixed. Lamoriello told everyone, go ask Vancouver about why it didn't work. So do you think he goes after a guy like JT Miller again if the team starts floundering offensively early on in the season?
With JT Miller, that's kind of its own thing. I mean, for sure, you've heard more than enough rumors about JT Miller that we don't need to get into it so much. I'll say with the draft rumors about it, my hunch on it, I don't have insider information, is that Vancouver was asking for the 13th pick and another piece, whether it be a prospect or a younger player, and Lamoriello invited on that. That's my hunch on that. But pushing it aside, I don't think Lamoriello is going to get a forward if they struggle early on. That's for sure out of the picture. They actually don't want to imagine a world where the Islanders are struggling early on and fans are like, it's an empty arena, not an empty arena, but like attendance is down again. And like the ownership has to like launch Lamoriello into space or something. But that's like, I don't see them getting a forward if they struggle. They're good. They're the team to watch with that in mind. And I don't know about JT Miller because back to him for a second, is Vancouver looks like they're going to be competing in the Pacific. I mean, that we're not going to preview the Canucks intensely right now, but just to say that I think they're going to be competitive in the Pacific. And then you kind of look around and who's available. Patrick Kane, but if I were to make my prediction, I think there's only 3 teams that he would choose to go to. I don't think the Islanders are a good selling point for him. I mean, that's on based on like, why would he want to go to on Long Island? And then the other guy is David Pastrnak potentially. If the Bruins struggle, they plan on running it back. They got Patrice Bergeron. And then otherwise, you really have to wonder in terms of buying in is looking at a team that's going to potentially fall apart. Maybe the Winnipeg Jets fall apart next year and they start looking at a rebuild. I wouldn't say they trade Kyle Connor. He's too good for that. And he's also got too many good prime years left in him. But maybe a Pierre-Luc Dubois, depending on what's going on there. Basically, that's basically what they're looking at entering the season. If they're good, they could be one of the buyers. They could be one of the teams that makes a move for a forward. And that's kind of where you're looking at in that situation.
So you just kind of went through a lot of guys that you think that Lamoriello could acquire. You don't see him making any moves. So I want to talk about Matt Barzal. And I was going to ask kind of what would Lamoriello need to do to acquire to give him firepower. But let me ask you this way. What does Matt Barzal need to do to get him back to have that firepower that saw him record 85 points in his rookie season?
Yeah, I think last season was where we saw the limitations on Barzal. I think the thing that really stood out was that he missed Jordan Eberle on his way. And Jordan Eberle gave him that. He's a sharpshooter that can also he's also a natural goal scorer. So with Barzal, he's gonna draw some space. For Barzal personally, though, so that was something he missed. And the Islanders, who are they gonna put on the wing for him? That's a big question. But what he needs, this is something that a lot of fans point out because it's also a frustrating thing, is get the puck on net. And a lot of times you see him, and it sounds simple, and like for people who aren't as skilled as him, like we really can't criticize his game like that. But he dances around with the puck, he skates around with it, and like he's holding on to it, and he gets those open looks. And for him, it's like, just get the puck on net, just get those shots on net.
Yeah.
And that's kind of where you're seeing, like, maybe with a new fit that could happen. But that's a big critique, if you will, is like, just take more shots. Just you have the open looks, take those shots.
Yeah. Well, he's got so much speed, and that's what he's so fast. And that's the year that he scored those 85 points, Brock Besser was in the running to be the Calder winner, and then he got hurt, that back injury. But Barzal's he's so fast, and he's such a good playmaker too. So having a guy that could, consistently score on his line would be good. But yeah, I get it. Just shoot more, like just get some more shots. So, and he'll probably score more then. But it sounds simple, but it's hard to get guys like the Canucks had the Sedins for a number of years, and they never shot the puck. So.
The part two on that is that. Part two is that he is the primary puck handler, and there's this kind of this feeling of I need to distribute and not just like take those shots. There is part of that. You could say that Anders Lee leaving his line last year also hurt him, because Anders Lee's the guy who knows where his bread is buttered. He gets to this and he can finish those goals. So those are the kind of things you're looking at, and you're like, okay, we saw his limitations. Now we need to compensate for that.
Yeah. Well, let's talk about a guy that did score goals last year. Brock Nelson, his 30-goal season, but his first one and his only one right now. Is that a flash in the pan, or is that something we can expect from him moving forward?
The answer, if I had to bet on it, would say that's a flash in the pan. He's not hitting 30 again. I don't want to be like and take a negative take on that, as much as say it's hard to get 30 goals in a season. And I think like that's worth celebrating even in a non-playoff year. But the plus side is to that season, it kind of showed one, what Brock Nelson can add to the offense, and two, what Anders Lee can provide for him, which was kind of crazy halfway through the season when they switched those lines. But having those two, because they're two natural goal scorers, their instincts. But Nelson became more of a well-rounded playmaker, and those two together is just a good combination to have for the Islanders.
Yeah, I mean, it's it would be nice if he could get 30 again, but it doesn't seem like he's going to. So, all right, I want to ask you, heading into the 2022-23 season for the New York Islanders, what is the biggest storyline or question mark?
I would start by saying the big question mark is Lane Lambert. And I think it sounds like, okay, like, yeah, new head coach, like cliche, but the interesting things that I'm going to be looking for is how does he differentiate himself from Barry Trotz? How is he going to change himself? How is he going to separate himself from a system he's been in, I think, since Washington or whenever?
Yeah.
But basically, how is he going to separate himself from that? And two, really, what lines is he going to play? I like to say like Lane Lambert is life in the fast lane. Is my new one for the Islanders offense. But it's really like, how is this team going to look and what are their lines going to look, basically.
Okay.
Yeah,
like
that's a good point. Yeah. You know, there's a division here that the Islanders are in is going to be so tough this year. I mean, probably the toughest. I would say the toughest in the East for sure. Maybe the NHL. So how does this forward group match up with the other strong teams that are in the Metropolitan Division?
So I would say, yeah, forwards alone. I mean, we can compare the teams. We're
breaking it down sections. Yeah. So forwards first.
Forwards alone, I'd say, I mean, simply put, they don't have the star power. They have the depth to compete with the other forward units. They don't have the star power. They don't have, I mean, you look at the Penguins, for example, which are the opposite, where they have Crosby, Gensel, Brian Rust, those three. And it's like, okay, like, doesn't really matter after that because you have those three players. And they have the depth. Like, bottom six might be better than most bottom six forward groups in the Metro Division. The negative with that, I think we saw last year, because you generally, when you ask in team building, we'd rather have star power, but not a lot of depth, or depth, but no star power. Last year, we saw what happens when you have that depth, but then again, Pajot's injured for a bit. This guy goes on the COVID list. This guy gets hurt. All of a sudden, your depth isn't there, and the whole team falls apart. On the contrary, if you have a team like the Capitals or the Penguins, where it's like, you have those stars, as long as they're in the lineup, they kind of can bail out your team, kind of carry your team to a few wins. The Islanders don't have that. So that's where I would say their forward unit is. It's not in that Metro, in the Metro, like if you were to rank it.
Okay. All right, well, let's move over to defense now. Starting off with an individual, let's get your expectations for Alexander Romanov in the 2022-23 season.
I'm actually really excited, and this is partially because I finally did draft homework for the first year. And entering the draft, I know I'm not as big a draft expert as you guys. The big thing I took away is if the Islanders take defense in the first round, they're not going to get Shimon Nemec, and they're not going to get Jiricek, who went to Columbus. I was like, okay, those two. So who's the next best guy? And I liked Kevin Korchinski. He was a guy who I was like, okay, if he falls to 13, which like on the draft boards, he went from anywhere from like 6 to 20. So I was like, he was the only one who I was like, okay, if they can get him, he's a very good puck handler. But so entering the draft to know that, okay, they weren't going to get him. And then they traded for a proven defenseman as their first round pick. I was like, that's a win. Yeah. So that was kind of the thought process entering the draft. If you're not going to get your guy for the future, drafting Romanov's a good pick there. I'm getting him that pick. I like him as a defensive defenseman. I think he's I asked some of the Canadian writers that we have here who were like, oh, we really miss him now already. Well, it makes sense because rebuilding. He's a hard hitter, good defensive defenseman. He's younger. He's a guy that can pair with Noah Dobson. And he plays the left side, which is something the Islanders struggled with last year. With Chara and Green on that left side. So it's a big addition just because they get younger, they get faster, and there's a lot of upside with that. and he was the Canadians' top defenseman last year. In terms of like you look at defensive point shares, block shots. He led their team in hits, so you could say he had the triple crown for those defensive stats.
It did seem like the Islanders' left side really struggled after Leddy left.
I mean, it was really weird that like Islanders fans and Blues fans, especially when Leddy got hurt in the second round or in the playoffs, collectively miss Nick Leddy because like most NHL fans are like Nick Leddy of all people. But,
I loved him on the Red Wings last year. So.
Yeah, like the Red Wings fans are like, "Are you serious?" Red Wings Chicago, where they were like, "Are you seriously missing Nick Leddy?" Like, and the contrast is with Chara and Green playing those sides and they accumulated a lot of ice time, which I don't think fans were expecting coming into the season. They were thinking like, Chara's an innings eater kind of guy at this age, and he was playing like right next to Dobson, which slowed Dobson down. And it became something that slowed the unit down. And in today's game, you need to be able to get the puck out of the zone. You need to handle the puck out. So Romanov can potentially do all that. He still needs to work on his offensive game, which we could see is an interesting thing from this season, potentially if he develops that. But it's a huge upgrade for probably their best unit, I'd say, or second best unit besides for goaltending. But that's the big positive note from the offseason, big addition for that matter.
Yeah. Well, you mentioned his name there, Noah Dobson. He had a career season last year, breakout season. Does he continue his ascent into that realm of elite top pairing defenseman?
He's the guy in the defense you could be excited about, really excited about, in the sense like what he can add. Last year was kind of like, it was like you'd say baptism by fire, but like he kind of had to take on a larger role because Pollock was out and he had to play the power play, and he was the primary puck handler with Chara sharing time with Chara. So his rise last year was a breakout year, but there's a lot to be excited about the way he plays. I don't think I don't think you should say, okay, he's gonna be Adam Fox, Cale Makar type level, but you're getting a very good young defenseman in Noah Dobson, and so it's very exciting considering he's 22. He's gonna be on the team for the next 3 years at least, and then after that you could see a long-term deal, which puts him through his prime years. And it's very exciting to have him right now. That's a very good bright spot, I'd say, on the team. That in mind.
Yeah, I think the Canucks actually were asking for him personally in the JT Miller trade.
They called and said like, we want the 13th and Noah Dobson, but Dobson in Lamoriello's eyes, he's untouchable, and understandably, even for a top player like that, he's one of the core, I would say, like a key part of what's going to make this team a successful team, if you'd say.
Yeah, I think you're absolutely right there. All right, well, now let's talk about the defense core as a whole. How do they match up with other teams in the Metro? So we talked about the forwards a little bit. You said kind of in the middle there. What do you think about the defense comparing in the Metro?
So I wouldn't say they're as good on the offensive end, or you'd say like in terms of starting up the offense as, let's say, the Rangers or even the Penguins with Chris Letang still there and still churning out assists and goals from. But their defense is what's going to carry them this year, and it's probably the best. It might be one of the best defensive units. I'd say maybe Carolina's, although kind of not sure how with Brent Burns there, like how that's going to work out. That's the question mark. But they're right up there with Carolina, the Rangers defense, especially on the defensive end of the ice. I'd say that's what's going to carry them, and that's it's right up there with those teams.
Yeah, they're a good unit. I think they're a good, well-rounded unit. I think they can get some more offense.
The only issue I'd say is right now, like who's going to play alongside Scott Mayfield.
Mm.
And that's kind of, I mean, it could be Romanov because Romanov's the left side defenseman, but then who you're going to pair with Dobson. Yeah. And that's really the tricky part. And whether it's Sebastian Aho or they make him a full-time defenseman this year, or Robin Salo. Robin Salo is the one the fans want because they know that he's the higher ceiling guy. But if you bring him in early on, you could tell his head's going to be spinning. It's the same with Dobson a few years. Dobson, when he joined in 2021, in that 2020-2021 season, the shortened season, his head was spinning those first few games. He was like really trying to slow the game down for him. And it's going to be the same thing. If Salo comes up, his head's going to be like spinning the first few games. You're going to be like, okay, we need to give him some like time, ease him in here, let the game settle down for him. That's basically the only issue, really, say, with the defense.
Yeah. Well, we'll see how that all plays out because this division is going to be heck of a division to watch.
Oh yeah.
Okay, let's talk about the last line of defense, the goaltending, and the Islanders have a really good young goaltender starting for them, Ilya Sorokin. Is this the year he enters the realm of elite goaltenders? Like we got Igor Shesterkin on the Rangers. Do you think he can enter that type of realm? Maybe not Shesterkin-esque, but in that area.
I'd say yes, but in terms of like, can he be a Vezina trophy? I'd say yes, but he's on a snap count, or he's on a minutes or a games count, because like one of the things that is just like, if I go off on a tangent, one of the things I always like to measure a goaltender with is how many shots they face. So it's like a triple slash line: save percentage, goals against average, and how many shots. So like, for example, Connor Hellebuck always faces more shots, so his numbers are always worse, but he's always getting, partially his defense. So Sorokin is going to have very good, he's going to be an elite goaltender, but he's not going to play as many games. You're looking at 50, maybe 60 is like a ceiling. And he's also, in terms of whether you compare him to other goaltenders, he's going to face, I think, less shots to begin with. Just the Islanders' defense is better. So, to answer your question, he's a elite goaltender. He's a unique elite goaltender because he's not big. He's not as big. He's more athletic, and he makes, like, you saw those highlight saves where he had one against the Rangers, where he's like sprawling out because he's able to just quickly make those quick saves. And so that's like kind of what makes him stand out. So to answer your question, yes and no. I don't know if I was able to do that.
Well, you talked about, Sorokin only getting about 50, 60 games. So that's going to leave Semyon Varlamov coming over from the Washington Capitals to kind of fill in that role. So do you think Varlamov is going to end up staying with the team the entire season, or is he going to end up being trade bait?
When Varlamov wasn't on the Capitals?
Or sorry. I totally misspoke there. Yeah,
he was on the Capitals in like 2017, I think.
Yeah, that's right. I'm thinking of Samsonov.
Yeah.
Oh my gosh, it is late tonight. I apologize.
Wow.
Varlamov was many years ago. Samsonov was a couple years ago. Let's talk about Varlamov. Is Varlamov going to stay with the Islanders for the entire season, or is he going to end up getting traded before the end of the year? And I apologize to everyone at home. It's been a very long day over here.
It's late on the East Coast. I feel it too. To answer your question, if he's not traded before the season starts, which doesn't look like he is, he's not getting traded. And that's his quick answer for it. The longer answer is, I don't if they were to trade him mid-season, it would have happened last season.
Yeah.
And it's hard to see goaltenders, especially starting goaltenders who get traded as a starter, get traded mid-season. Fleury is kind of the exception, where he went to Minnesota and became that starter. It's really because if you're to compare to other sports, goaltenders are like starting quarterbacks and kickers at the same time, and they're starting pitchers, where it's like they're very much like it's a mental game as much, where it's like you need to be in the right setting, you need to have your routine, and all of a sudden the mid-season get like picked up and dropped off in Mount Everest. It's like you just need the oxygen. So that's basically like one thing. But to dive deeper into it, I'd say Lamoriello, one of the few times he hasn't spoken much this off season. He spoke, I think, twice. Once after the draft,
yeah,
and once his after the draft, where his famous lines were talk to Vancouver, and his second time was after he basically re-signed all the restricted free agents, and he spoke. So one of the interesting things he said, like, we will not give up defense, and he says our team's built from goaltending, defense, forwards, and I mean, Lamoriello's always liked good goaltenders, whether it's Brodeur or now with the Islanders. There's always been a rotation, whether it's Leonard and Thomas Greiss and Varlamov. So that's like an essential part of their success this year, is rotating those two. And that in mind, I think that's what you're going to see this year.
Yeah, I've asked that on the podcast a couple times already too, and it seems like Varlamov is probably going to stay. I asked that question when Leonard went down in Vegas, that they may go after Varlamov, but obviously they didn't. They went for Aiden Hill, so hopefully we'll see how that goes. Let's get to how they match up in this division, which has a few pretty good goaltenders in it, namely Shesterkin. But what do you think about the goaltending matching up in the Metro? Yeah,
I mean, they're as a duo with those two. It's also like right up there with the other ones. I mean, Carolina was very good last year. It's also one of the things why I like measuring goaltenders in shots, is because the Carolina do the pairing of those two goaltenders is great, but they played behind a great defense. Yeah. So you always have to account for that. And that's also why Shesterkin, like, he wasn't just splitting reps or splitting starts. He was the goaltender, the starter for the Rangers. So I think those two, though, you could put them right next to Carolina. Pittsburgh's got a underrated goaltending duo. People don't like. Tristan Jarry had a very good season last year, I think, like better than people thought. So it's right there with Pittsburgh. It's probably better than Pittsburgh, but it's right there with the Rangers and the Hurricanes, and that's kind of where I'd say they're at right now.
Yeah, and I think, to go along to that point, Washington's new goaltender, Darcy Kemper, kind of got the exact same, treatment in Colorado last year. I mean, he was a good goaltender, but he didn't have to be great very often. So absolutely, to your point there. All right, we're going to move into our quick fire round here, Mike. We're going to throw some questions at you in terms of the New York Islanders for the 2022-23 season. And we want you to give us a sentence or two for each question. And, just give us your best answer first that comes to mind. So I want you to pick one or two breakout stars for the upcoming season.
All right. Not bold one is Oliver Wahlstrom. I think if a lot of people want him on next to Barzal, if he plays on the Barzal line, actually gets open shots and starts taking them, he could be a big goal scorer. Bold prediction would be if Ratu is ready by midseason and he comes into the team, and I compare it to David Pastrnak, where it's like he comes in, brings that youth presence to an older team, and all of a sudden the championship window's open for a few years. That's like a wild, bold prediction. Like, very unlikely. But that's like, if you really want to look at breakout star, if he joins the team mid-season. Some people think before camp, but whatever. Like mid-season joins the team and all of a sudden adds 20 goals to the forward unit, like at the center position. A lot needs to happen for that, but that's like the bold one. If we're gonna,
I love it. That's great. Yeah. All right, one player that needs to bounce back from last season.
One, Beauvillier just didn't fit with the wherever they played him, whatever situation. He needs to bounce back. There's one line that I think kind of looked different last year, partially injuries. I'd say the fourth line, the identity line. It didn't look like the similar self that gave the team the edge. It gives the Islanders an edge every night. It wasn't. It also had injuries that they dealt with. So that's the line, I'd say. But one player, Beauvillier.
Love it. All right. who is going to be the New York Islanders X factor this season?
I guess it depends on what an X factor. X factor, I mean, is it like one player that can really give them the edge? I'd say it's Barzal, but one player that's like we're not talking about that can really help the offense is Palmieri. Same theme as Wahlstrom. Palmieri's a good shooter. If he gets open looks, and last year he started to turn a corner. I think he scored 14 of his 15 goals in the last 40 games. Not exactly sure if that's right, but basically he started shooting the puck on net. He could be, if we're looking at X factors in that sense, he's the X factor. Palmieri's the X factor in it for them.
Good stuff. All right, you mentioned him earlier, which is probably this is going to be your answer, but pick one prospect, rookie or prospect, that could surprise and make the team out of camp.
So the obvious answer is Aturatu, but the one that is the interesting one that I think actually sounds more realistic is Robin Salo, where he makes he makes the team out of camp, has an impressive camp, makes the team, and he starts early on and he doesn't look back and he rounds out the defensive unit.
Love it. Who is one player that fans should be watching that we have yet to mention?
I'd say there's kind of a few, but two players we haven't mentioned are Ryan Pollock and Adam Pelech, which you could argue is the best defensive pairing, like purely defensively, and that's really what's helped the Islanders. Last year, Ryan Pollock was hurt, and it really showed. So Ryan Pollock's the guy that you should really be watching. It's hard to watch defense and like see it and say like that's what we're looking for. That's
the best
exciting.
Defense are the ones that go unnoticed.
Yeah.
So it really is hard to watch them because if they stand out, then something's wrong.
they both tend Pelech and Pollock. Islanders fans have really picked up on it, but it's hard to know that they're two really good defensive players. And I mean, Pollock, I think fans saw on the national audience saw it when he blocked the shot against the Lightning in Game 3, where Ryan McDonough like turned around Varlamov and like shot, and Pollock just like blocked it. Yeah. But to win that, like sealed the game. So everyone saw that, but like for a while, like those are the two guys that I'd say like we haven't mentioned them. Yeah, they're the guys that like really are the unsung heroes.
That's why you don't mention them. You're like, they just do their job. They go and do their job. That's how it goes. All right. Who will lead the team in scoring at forward?
In goals or points? Because in terms
the way
of
I go with scoring is in points.
Points, yeah.
Okay. Because that's another sort of like rant thing. I think Barzal leads them in points. My whole thing is I like to split goals and assists, say when measuring a player. So I think Anders Lee's going to be the leading goal scorer, but between like Brock Nelson and Anders Lee, I think Anders Lee will have a slight edge, and then Barzal will also have a high number. But Barzal could have 25 goals potentially. It could be which would be a step up, and then have 45 assists, which I guess would put him at 70 points, which isn't so much now, which isn't as much as like I guess you'd hope for. So maybe he has 30. We'll move him to 30 and 50, so he can have an 80-point season. Those are the two. The points: Barzal, goals, Lee. I'd say.
There we go. All right. What about defense? So I probably guess who that's going to be.
Yeah, I mean it's got to be a Dobson. Again, I want it. There was a part of me that said I want to pick like Ryan Pollock potentially because he's going to get the power play minutes again, but Dobson's going to probably be the primary power play point player and get a lot of assists there. And he's also just going to continue to play well at point. Romanov could, I think we could actually see what Romanov does in the offensive end just because the Canadians couldn't provide that last year. Like a lot went wrong for them to not have that, but I think it's Dobson's to lose. He's going to have the most points, I'd say.
Put on your best Lou Lamoriello hat. Pick one player that could be traded before the deadline.
Scott Mayfield. He's on an expiring contract.
Yeah.
If they're really losing, he's a proven defenseman. He's gonna get a good offer. He's on an expiring contract. Yeah, he's the guy that could be moved.
Yeah, definitely see that. Okay, ultimate question now. Where will the Islanders finish in the standings? And will they make the playoffs?
So this is kind of my belief on the Metro, is that the floor is higher in the Metro this year, but the ceiling is lower. Because I think last year you saw the three teams, whether it's the Penguins, Hurricanes, and Rangers, all three looked like Stanley Cup teams throughout the season. I think all three, in a way, are taking a slight step back, where like you kind of saw the ceiling last year for a lot of them. I think they all have question marks entering the season. So it's going to be just like Islanders are going to be in that mix of that like Metro, where the floor is higher, or like Columbus is going to be better, the Devils are going to be slightly better. I don't know how much better yet. But the Islanders are going to be in that mix, and then mid-season you're going to see if they can make a move, and that would be the move that would put them over. That would not just get them in the playoffs, but send the message they're going for the cup. So that's where I'd say they're at right now, where they're like they could finish third place in the Metro or fourth, which would be a playoff spot. But that's where you could see them right now. Then maybe at trade deadline you see them making a big move.
All right. I like that. Well, let's give you one last question here. Let's finish off with a doozy. Pick one bold prediction or hot take for the New York Islanders in the 2022-23 season.
So I was trying to think of like what could be like a random hot take or a random bold take. So I think mine would be that the Islanders finish in the top half of the league in both points scored and points against. Okay. I think the bolder prediction is that they average over 3 goals a game, which they haven't done. In the past 4 seasons.
Okay.
Under Trotz, they have not done it, which is like really says about the style was like, okay, they were going to win low scoring games, and this is the year that they score over 3 goals per game. They average over 3 goals per game, and they also are top half defensively, whether it's top 10 or top 5. I wouldn't say for sure, but they're going to be top half in both. That's my take.
I like it.
All right. So we got the Wild and the Islanders in the top. Mariah had the Wild leading the West, and leading the West,
leading the NHL, leading the league in goals scored. So going to be a lot of goals being scored this year. I like it. I mean, last year was the most ever, but then again, it's first year ever. There's 32 teams in a league, so you're obviously going to have more goals.
Yeah.
But yeah. All right, Mike. Well, we're not going to quite let you go yet, because one of our traditions here on the Hockey Writers podcast is to do an article of the day. So I want you to pick an article from the New York Islanders writing team. It can be your own, but give us an article of the day.
Yeah, I'm gonna have to pick one of my own, plug my own articles here.
That's all right. That's what everyone's been doing so far. So you're not alone.
So yeah, I'm starting preseason, like basically training camp, where I'm just getting all the preseason stuff in to get ready for. One of them that I always like to start with, and this is really for any team, is so I wrote the 5 Islanders that are essential to next season's success, the 2022-2023 season success. And it's a question I really like asking for any team before the season starts, is who are your 5 best players, or who are your 5 essential building blocks? And it's a question I like asking particularly about rebuilding teams, because if you don't have those 5 building blocks, how good does this rebuild look? So the Islanders, who are your 5 best players or 5 essential players to their success? And we mentioned for sure, I think we mentioned all of them through this podcast. So they're all in there, but just in different orders. But it's basically who are your 5 key players to like for this season, and just like for this season's success, basically.
Yeah.
Nice.
I like it. It was a very good article. It just came out 2 days ago, but read it yesterday, and so fantastic job, Mike. All right. Well, that is going to wrap up this episode of the Hockey Writers Podcast NHL 2022-23 season preview show, focusing on the New York Islanders. Make sure to follow Mike and the rest of our New York Islanders writers, both through our page at the Hockey Writers, the Islanders page, their own author pages. Follow them on social media. make sure you're signing up for all of our podcasts, our YouTube channels. You can sign up below. Make sure you sign up for the Hockey Writers Morning Skate newsletter. It comes out every Monday, Wednesday, and Friday until the season starts, and then we'll be back to 5 days a week for free to your inbox. From everyone here at the Hockey Writers Podcast, thank you for watching.